Dramatic changes proposed for the NHS in England with fewer GP surgeries, hospitals and beds, all part of government plans to save money. NHS England says it's aimed at improving patient care, but there's concern as to why the plans haven't yet been made public. Well, the BBC has seen the plans. We'll be looking at the potential impact and ask when the public will have their say. Also this lunchtime, the number of people killed in Italy's earthquake rises to 267. Strong aftershocks hamper rescue efforts and hopes of finding more survivors fade. 3 British victims have now been identified among the dead: 14-year-old Marcus Burnett and Will Henniker Gottlieb and his wife, Maria. Aid workers arrive in a Syrian town under siege for 4 years after a deal to allow thousands of people to be evacuated. American swimming champion Ryan Lochte is charged over lying about being robbed at gunpoint during the Olympics. He could face 18 months in jail. And man's best friend, the tale of the marathon runner and his lost dog Gobi, reunited after days of searching and a global online campaign.
In the south, emotions run high as campaigners fight to stop specialist doctors being withdrawn from their local maternity units. And a heartfelt plea from the family of a man who died abroad without travel insurance.
Hello, very good afternoon. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. NHS services then across England could be dramatically cut as part of wide-ranging efficiency plans. The proposals seen by the BBC include cuts to bed numbers and changes to the care provided by GPs and A&E departments. NHS England says no changes will be made without local consultation. But the campaign group, who uncovered many of the draft proposals, says it's concerned there hasn't been enough transparency. Here's our correspondent, Robert Piggott.
The proposals are far-reaching and will touch every part of England. Accident and emergency departments, wards and sometimes entire hospitals would be shut down. The aim to close what would otherwise be a £22 billion gap in funding by 2020. Documents seen by the BBC include proposals to close one of the 3 acute hospitals in Leicestershire and Rutland and to review GP surgeries there. In the Black Country, a major accident and emergency department could be closed. Campaigners say the changes are being rushed through without patients being aware of what might happen to their services.
I think the key thing to get across here is just how rushed the timeline is here. They're due to be agreed this October, and that means that as things stand, one of 2 things will happen. Either a consultation will be rushed through before then, or patients will be confronted with plans after October that are essentially signed off, a done deal, and unlikely to change anymore.
Cuts to health services provoke strong local reaction. These changes are likely to be controversial.
It's just marginalising people who are not able to afford to access private health. It's not a surprise, but it's just appalling.
If the population's increasing by 1 million every 3 years, which is roughly 330,000, and there's austerity in the public sector, how can the public sector cope with increased population when there's less money being spent on it?
The government officials who have their hand in the NHS pockets, they should get the cuts, not the doctors, nurses, patients, everyone who uses and works on the NHS on the front lines.
The research group, the Nuffield Trust, has warned that some areas are proposing reductions of up to 20% of beds and will have an impact on patients.
Well, it looks like quite a lot of these plans at the moment are proposing big, large-scale reconfigurations. That's shifting services or shutting services down, providing them elsewhere. Our research finds that in a lot of these types of reconfigurations, you don't save very much money. All that happens is the patients simply go to the next hospital down the road. They're more inconvenienced, they have to travel further, but it rarely saves the money that's needed.
But health service leaders have tried to reassure patients that services won't suffer.
What we're trying to do is that we are trying to accept that there is a growth of demand on services, and with that demand comes rising costs, and we're not trying to say, well, the simple answer is to just slash and burn and close services, but in fact, we need to think about how we deliver services.
And NHS England, who commissioned the plans, said this is a unique exercise in collaboration. No changes to the services people currently receive will be made without local engagement and, where required, consultation. The proposals will be approved nationally in October. Only after that will the public get their say.
Well, Robert joins us now. I'll just pick up on some of those points that you made then, because this probably is the first time that people will have heard about this. So why? And you mentioned October is when people might find out a little more.
Yes, that's when they're signed off by the NHS. But the reason that they haven't yet heard about them in detail, that is one that people will be asking and politicians will be asking in local areas. Because if you think about it, this whole plan had its background in the NHS Strategic 5-Year Forward View back in October 2014. So it's some time after that. And yet these sustainability and transformation plans, which is what these 44 local areas were asked to draw up, only started in January, so they were only given a few months to come up with this. And so people will be asking that question. I think the answer to your question, though, Kate, is that this is very controversial stuff. People hate to see services, even if it's the dermatology department being closed in their local hospital or wards being closed, let alone A&E, let alone a whole district general hospital. So this is really potent stuff, and I think that this was a discussion the Health Service wanted to have out of the glare of publicity.
OK, well, we'll see what happens there. But I suppose the other big question then is, why more cuts when we're already told the NHS is at breaking point?
Well, it's a question of necessity apart from anything else. So you're looking, if you project into the future, of a £22 billion gap in funding and demand in 2020. So something has to be done. There has been an injection of money by the government. It's a question of making the reorganisation to use that efficiently. And what the NHS says, it's about using the same money more cleverly. So having centres of excellence, getting GPs to provide some hospital services sometimes, getting some hospitals to take pressure off GPs where that's appropriate. And I think the take-home message is more joined-up thinking to try and get over the fact that we have an increasing demand all the time on the NHS, something like 3 or 4% a year. We have an ageing population which is living longer but often in poorer health. More of these chronic conditions like diabetes and obesity and so on, which are costly to the NHS, and something has to be done to make that money go further. And these are ways, most of them, of achieving that end.
Robert, thank you. Now, more than 260 people are now known to have died in the earthquake that devastated villages in Italy's central region on Wednesday night. 3 Britons are among the dead. One of them, a 14-year-old Marcus Burnett from London, who was on holiday with his parents and sister. Will Henneke Gottlieb, aged 55, and his wife Maria from Stockwell in London were also killed. Nearly 400 people are being treated in hospital. Strong aftershocks continue in the area. Sarah Campbell reports.
The search and rescue operation in Pescara del Tronto has been called off. The residents would have been in their beds when the quake struck just after 3:30 in the morning. Looking at what's left of their homes, it seems almost miraculous that just 10 out of the town's population of 135 are believed to have died. The Prime Minister has declared a state of emergency and pledged £42 million to rebuild the area.
We will probably never be able to completely dry our tears. Those who've lost their loved ones certainly won't. But when we start to recover, we must make a big effort in the reconstruction of those towns. That is our priority for Italy.
In Amatrice, it's now known a 14-year-old British boy named as Marcus Burnett was killed. He was holidaying with his family. A British couple in their 50s, named as Maria and Richard William Henneke Gottlieb from Stockwell in London, were also killed. Footage has just been released by the Italian police, showing the first moments they arrived in Amatrice, one of the worst-hit towns. The town's mayor has since said no building is now safe to live in. The search continues today, with rescuers risking their own lives to find those who may still be trapped.
There is still hope of finding survivors under the rubble. We saw that in 2009, people were still rescued from the rubble 72 hours after it struck, but it does seem increasingly unlikely.
After the last major earthquake here 7 years ago, pledges were made to strengthen buildings against earthquakes. This school was renovated in 2012, but large parts have obviously collapsed. With so many buildings across the region reduced to rubble, Italian prosecutors have started a criminal investigation to see whether anyone is to blame. Meanwhile, survivors are still coming to terms with what's happened.
I have no idea what I'm going to do now, because I had renovated the house 2 years ago. It was all new. Now I don't know what to do. I'm 76. I don't know if I can rebuild it.
Hundreds whose towns and villages have been destroyed are now facing uncertain futures.
Sarah joins us now. So many communities devastated in Italy, Sarah, and of course we are now hearing more about the 3 Britons who have also died.
Indeed, this is of course a very popular area for British tourists, and the Foreign Office had warned yesterday that some British people were involved, and so today we've had the names. 14-year-old Marcus Bennett from London, he was on holiday with his parents and his sister. He's known to have died. His parents, Anne and Simon, are currently being treated in a hospital, and in Rieta they're suffering from minor injuries. And a couple in their 50s from Stockwell in London have also been named as Richard William Henniker Gottlieb, known as Will, and Maria. He was 55, she was 50. We understand that both families knew each other and they were staying at the same holiday home in Amatrice when the earthquake happened. Of course, Amatrice very much at the centre of the earthquake. Now, a charity called Children and the Arts, where Maria had worked for the last 8.5 years, released a statement this morning. They said how shocked and saddened the team are by the news of her death and that of her husband Will, who also supported the charity. They say they've lost a valued colleague, but above all, 2 dear friends. The Foreign Office is providing consular support to both families, and we are expecting statements later today.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. Well, we can go to Amatrice now, and Jenny Hill, who is there. And what news now then on the recovery process, Jenny?
Well, rescue workers still hold out hope that they're not going to stop, but in reality, as every hour goes by, they themselves acknowledge that the likelihood now of finding anyone alive under the rubble is diminishing very fast. Really, the sense here is that the focus is shifting to the survivors. This emergency medical centre was set up by medics overnight. It serves 2 purposes. First of all, there are 1, perhaps 2, maybe more thousand people who've lost their homes in the earthquake, who are living here in tents, in sports centres. Some have been sleeping in their cars. There is no hospital in the town of Amatrice because it was so badly damaged in the earthquake. So this, in a way, is a medical centre for anyone who might need some kind of medical attention. But it has a second function too. There have been hundreds of aftershocks and earthquakes since that first main quake, and some of those shocks and quakes have been very, very violent. Indeed, we've felt them ourselves. They really knock you from your feet. If you happen to be in an area where there is a lot of rubble, a lot of partially collapsed building and so on, it can be very, very dangerous. And I'm thinking particularly of those rescue workers who are perched up on those mounds of rubble, going into those collapsed structures in search of survivors. This medical centre has been set up in case those aftershocks, those earthquakes continue. There was one here in Amatrice this morning, magnitude around 4.8. So they want to be prepared just in case those shocks start to cause widespread injury. It is a difficult time for Italy. At the same time as all of the emergency response, there is this fierce and very sensitive public debate about whether this death toll had to be so high, whether this could have been prevented, whether lessons could have been better learned following the 2009 L'Aquila earthquake, which killed more than 300. It's a sensitive topic and it's going on in the background, but for the time being the focus is on survivors here. One more note for you, the mayor of Amatrice, we can't confirm this yet, but he has told a respected Italian news agency that the town is so badly damaged that it may have to be levelled to the ground.
OK, Jenny, thank you. Well, there'll be more details about those efforts to find and help further survivors of the earthquake. You can go to the website bbc.co.uk/news. Aid workers in Syria have arrived in the town of Daraya to help evacuate thousands of civilians there who've been under siege by government forces for the past 4 years. It follows a deal struck between rebels who've been holding the town and the government. Around 4,000 people will be taken to shelters in and around Damascus. Richard Lister has more.
A welcome sight for the besieged residents of Daraya. These ambulances and aid vehicles will be the first contact some have had with the outside world for months or even years. They'll bring some of the 8,000 remaining inhabitants to shelters in Damascus. And inside Daraya, an eerie quiet. This suburb is just a 15-minute drive from the centre of Damascus, but it's been a rebel stronghold since 2012, a thorn in President Assad's side that he's now removed with unrelenting bombardments. The last hospital was destroyed a week ago, and in 4 years only one food aid convoy was able to get through. The UN said people here had been forced to eat grass. The outgoing UN humanitarian envoy to Syria told the BBC for too long the world's major powers have lacked the one prerequisite for tackling the war.
Political gut and courage on the part of the international community, including the Security Council, before you come down to the local players. This was allowed to happen for far too long, and now it is really a struggle to get it turned again in the right direction.
In Geneva today, the sound of diplomacy in action as the American Secretary of State and his Russian counterpart met to finalise a cooperation agreement on Syria. The aim is to clear the ground for a ceasefire, begin a process of political transition and tackle Islamic extremists in the region.
It's good that these two powers are coming together. There are points of convergence. They want to concentrate on the fight against ISIS. They also want to work against the Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria, which is the biggest of the rebel groups.
As they talk, though, this brutal war continues. This is the aftermath of a barrel bombing in Aleppo yesterday. With limited diplomatic progress so far, President Assad is continuing his offensive. There is no guarantee he'll accept any international deal presented to him. Richard Lister, BBC News.
Well, at least 11 police officers have been killed and 70 people injured in a suicide attack in southeastern Turkey. The truck bomb destroyed the police headquarters in the town of Cizre, a predominantly Kurdish town near the country's border with Syria and Iraq. The Turkish Prime Minister has blamed the Kurdish militant PKK group for the attack. It's now 17 minutes past 1 and our main story then this lunchtime. Dramatic changes proposed for the NHS in England with fewer GP surgeries, hospitals and beds as part of government plans to save money. And coming up, man's best friend, the tale of the marathon runner and his lost dog Gobi reunited after days of searching and a global online campaign.
And coming up in South today, feelings run high as campaigners fight to stop their local maternity unit losing its specialist doctors. And the joys of a staycation. The sun's out and businesses hope for a boost as we head into the bank holiday weekend.
Now, police in Brazil have charged the American swimmer Ryan Lochte with falsely reporting a crime. The 12-time Olympic medalist had claimed that he and 3 teammates were robbed at gunpoint during the Rio Games, but later apologised and admitted he was drunk. The crime faces, though, a maximum penalty of 18 months in prison, and the 32-year-old could be tried in his absence if he fails to return to Brazil. Richard Conway reports.
It is one of the longest hangovers in sporting history. Ryan Lochte and 3 teammates had enjoyed a big night out in Rio when events took an unseemly turn. Lochte claimed he and his fellow swimmers were robbed at gunpoint in a taxi, but Rio police said they made the story up, with video evidence showing the group being challenged by security guards after vandalising a petrol station toilet. Now Lochte has been charged with making a false statement and may face a summons for arrest. In a dramatic twist, Brazilian authorities removed Lochte's teammates from a US-bound plane just moments before it took off. But Ryan Lochte had already left Brazil soon after the Games and before he could be questioned about the alleged false claims. With the pressure building, the man who has won 12 Olympic medals in a glittering career admitted he was drunk and apologised.
That's why I'm taking full responsibility for it, is because I over-exaggerated that story. And if I'd never done that, we wouldn't be in this mess. Those guys would never be in Rio, or were in Rio. None of this would have happened.
Despite that mea culpa, Lochte's reputation has sunk like a stone. Several sponsors, including sportswear firm Speedo and fashion label Ralph Lauren, dropped the swimmer in the wake of his lie.
When I put it on, I feel like a superhuman. I'm like superhuman. I could beat anyone. Once I step on those blocks, I'm like an action figure.
Well, perhaps not anymore. Sections of the US media have made their feelings about Lochte very clear. Now the swimmer must decide whether or not to return to Brazil to defend the charges, which carry a maximum penalty of 18 months in prison. A return to Rio may be unlikely, but what isn't in doubt for one of America's greatest swimmers is the tarnishing of a once golden legacy. Richard Conway, BBC News.
The Green Party MP Caroline Lucas has raised the prospect of seeking electoral deals with other political parties in the run-up to the next general election. Ballots closed last night in the Greens leadership election, in which Ms Lucas is among 7 candidates, with the result due to be announced in a week's time. With more, our political correspondent Tom Bateman.
The hope is that this might help to regenerate the area.
A new sightseeing tower in Brighton takes in the constituency views of the Green Party's only MP. Caroline Lucas is standing for leader and taking a good look at the vista of British politics. She wants the Greens to think about doing deals with other parties like Labour before the next general election.
I think what we are looking at is those marginal constituencies where some kind of agreement between the progressive parties might be able to make a difference. Now, what that actually looks like, whether it's a candidate standing down, whether it's just not putting so much resource into that constituency, is all up for grabs.
The Greens' success on these shores has been hard to repeat elsewhere. Last year, the party dramatically increased its membership and got more than 1 million votes, but won only a single seat in Westminster. So their MP wants to change Britain's voting system. But how far does her party's appeal go?
They're the only party that is brave enough to talk about whether or not growth is sensible.
Can I just ask you what you think of the Green Party?
Not a lot, really.
A lot of their policies are very optimistic and very sort of well-meaning, well-intentioned, but poorly thought through.
In Oxfordshire, Green Party activists were pitching their message at an allotment festival. Plenty to talk about here for people who worry that their party risks losing ground as the left of politics is reshaped. This Green councillor knows all about turf wars on the political left. He was in the Labour Party for 30 years. Now he too is running for the Green Party leadership. So what of his rival's idea for an electoral alliance with other parties?
We can make agreements, I think, with the Liberal Democrats, with Plaid Cymru, with the SNP, but the advantages in terms of ousting the Tories as a result of that are quite marginal. But they could be substantial if Labour would come along and join the alliance. But
they would?
No, I don't think they will.
The growth of the Green Party over the last couple of years has been remarkable, breaking beyond its traditional image as a single-issue campaigning party on the environment. But its challenge now is to maintain that appeal in the face of a Labour Party rediscovering its left-wing roots. The Green Party will announce which of its 7 candidates has won the leadership next week, with talk of an election deal already opposed by Labour's leader. Whoever wins will know there is much more to do before becoming a force of nature in Westminster politics. Tom Bateman, BBC News.
An optometrist who failed to spot an eye condition in a young boy who later died has been given a suspended sentence after being found guilty of gross negligence by manslaughter. 8-year-old Vincent Barker died in July 2012, 5 months after he had a routine eye test at a Boots opticians. Well, Amy Cole is in Ipswich and you have more details, Amy.
Yes, I do. 8-year-old Vincent Barker, known as Vinny, died in July 2012 following a build-up of fluid on his brain. Now, he had been given a routine eye test 5 months earlier by optometrist Honey Rose, who's from Newham, at the Ipswich branch of Boots. Now, during her trial last month, Rose had told the court that she'd conducted all the required tests during that examination. But the prosecution claimed that her conduct at the time fell far below the expected standard and was deemed criminal. Well, today, the judge, Mr. Justice Smith, handed her a 2-year suspended sentence. He said that he was in no doubt that Mrs. Rose failed to conduct an internal eye examination and also to look at retinal images. Now, photographs of the back of Vinny's eyes had been taken by another member of staff, and it was found that he had bilateral pallidedema, which is a condition which affects the optic discs, and they were swollen, which suggests that there was pressure on his skull. The judge says that he recognised that Mrs. Rose was a generally competent optometrist who had done thousands of eye examinations, but on that day in February, had just failed to do it and failed to do a proper examination, describing it as a tragic lapse. Now, he said that the breach of duty was shocking, which led to the unexpected death of a very happy young child. He says it's an outrage when a child dies before its parents. But he also added that the Barker family were keen and anxious that no more suffering should take place. They understand that Mrs. Rose is a mother of 3, and so were keen that the judge considered that. And like I said, he today, just 5 minutes ago, handed her a suspended jail term of 2 years.
Okay, Amy, thank you. Amy Cole there in Ipswich. Now, their story had already captured hearts across the world. The marathon runner and the stray dog that had stuck by his side through a gruelling desert race in China. Dion Leonard and Gobi became inseparable during the 250-kilometre marathon, prompting the athlete to then adopt him. But before he could bring him home to Edinburgh, the dog disappeared. After a global online campaign and days of searching, the pair have now been reunited. John Sudworth reports from Beijing.
It's a story of, well, dogged determination. As Dion Leonard took part in the gruelling ultramarathon, a 150-mile run across China's forbidding Gobi Desert, he was joined by a surprise companion. And it was love at first stride.
She ran half of the race with me. We spent the whole week together and literally either by the side running or in the evening she was in my arms during the night sleeping and eating with me. So I knew before I left the race that I was going to bring her back.
But while he flew back to Scotland, just before the dog was due to go into Chinese quarantine, she escaped. Running, it seems, is in her blood. So Dion flew back to China and began what seemed like a hopeless task, looking for Gobi in the place she was last seen, Urumqi, a city of 3 million where very few people speak English.
So today is day 2 of trying to find Gobi, and I've been out handing these since 6 o'clock this morning and actually looking around the parks and local areas looking for the dogs and speaking to a lot of locals who actually think they've seen Gobi, but unfortunately it isn't Gobi, so it's a bit of a goose chase this.
But China's internet came to the rescue. The dog hunt spread like wildfire on social media, with messages of support and cash to fund the quest pouring in. Before long, Dion had a few leads, and Gobi was found.
I got some imagery of her through on my phone in the phone call saying that these people, this lovely father and son had found her, and we went out there to see her, and she ran across the lounge room and basically ran straight into my arms. She was so excited to see me, and I just walked in the door. I hadn't said a word to her either, so she knew it was me straight away.
So Gobi is once again preparing for a few months in quarantine, and then Dion expects to have her home before Christmas. Presumably the first command he'll want to teach her: stay. John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
Now we take you back to one of our main stories now, and the aftermath of the earthquake in Italy and the 3 Britons who are among the dead. Sarah Campbell rejoins us, and what can you tell us then, Sarah?
Well, Kate, just in the last half hour, pictures of the 3 British casualties that we know are involved have been released by the Foreign Office. So the first picture we have is of the British couple, Will Henniker-Gottlieb, who was 55, and his wife Maria, who was 50. They were from Stockwell in London. A charity called Children and the Arts, where Mrs. Henniker-Gottlieb worked for the past 8.5 years, released a statement today saying how shocked and saddened they were by the news of the death. Will was also a very strong supporter of the charity, and they say they've lost a valued colleague and 2 dear friends. Now, the couple, we understand, was staying in the same house in Amatrice as the Burnett family from London, and 14-year-old Marcus Burnett was also killed in the quake. His parents, Anne and Simon, are currently in hospital being treated for minor injuries. In a statement from the Foreign Office, the families have paid tribute to the Italian rescue workers and hospital staff, and they've expressed gratitude, they say, for the love and support they've received from the Italian people.
OK, Sarah, thank you. Now it's time to take a look at the weather with John We're not going to the weather just yet. I'm going to tell you about flaws in Apple's operating system. And they mean that phones can be easily hacked into and owners spied on. The discovery of problems in Apple's code was made by a human rights lawyer. Apple has since released a software update that addresses the problem. OK, good to know. We can now take you to take a look at the weather with John Hammond. Hello.
OK, it looks beautiful out there at the moment, but over the next couple of days, the weather is going to get itself into a right old pickle. Suffice to say, there is rain in the forecast. Warnings have been issued, but the devil will be in the details. The sort of situation, actually, where your mobile app might not be entirely reliable at this range. And I'll tell you why in a moment. But it is lovely out there at the moment. This picture taken by one of our weather watchers in North Yorkshire. Beautiful sunshine. Now, that is typical of the weather across most parts of the UK. As you can see on the satellite picture, there is some lumpy cloud across the northwest of Scotland, some showers here, some more prolonged rain for a time across the Northern Isles, keeping it cool here, but most other places staying fine through the rest of the afternoon. Not as oppressively hot and humid across the far southeast as it has been, but still pretty warm. Temperatures here already up into the high 20s in one or two places. Cooler further north and west, but in the sunshine. It's going to feel very nice indeed. And if you've got outdoor plans through this evening, the weather shouldn't cause you too many problems. Still the odd shower across the far north, but otherwise it's fine and dry and clear for the most part, and temperatures will tumble away actually in some rural areas. By the early hours in some northern parts of the UK, we could get down into single figures. A much more comfortable night for sleeping across the more southern and eastern parts of the UK. However, trouble is looming, and it all hinges on this weather front coming up from the south, a warm front. It does mean that initially at least we could well see some showers, some thunderstorms even, pushing into southern counties of England, heading their way further northwards and merging into some longer spells of rain, we think, somewhere across the heart of England. Now, to the north of that, it will be drier, and it might well brighten up to the southeast of that zone as well. But the position of that zone, pretty uncertain, as we'll see in a moment. Potentially still very warm across the far southeast if it brightens cooler and fresher to the northwest. But I want to concentrate on that frontal zone. It could be further to the southeast. It could also be further to the northwest across England and Wales. But at the moment, we think it's going to be lodged somewhere across the heart of the Midlands. And the position of that is where warm air meets cool air. And that generates a lot of energy in the atmosphere, and we spin up a lot of thick cloud and heavy rain, persistent rain, potentially later on tomorrow across parts of the Midlands and into some northern and eastern counties. Warnings have been issued. That rain could cause some disruption, quite a lot of rain in some places, so watch this space. Eventually, that frontal zone will slowly drift away into the North Sea, but still some heavy showers left behind across the UK during the course of Sunday. Still some warmth across the south, but always fresher the further north and west we are. Quite blustery winds across southern areas for a time. But the good news is that by Bank Holiday Monday, most of the rain should have cleared away. Still the odd shower perhaps, and more rain looming across the far northwest, but in the sunshine in most places, it should feel fine and dry. Keep up to date with those weather warnings by checking out the BBC weather website. That's it. Okay.
John, thank you very much indeed. And that is all we have time for now. On BBC One, though, it is time for the news where you will have a very good afternoon and weekend. Bye-bye.